I probably shouldn't have to say this, but in case you didn't know, I love Star Wars. And out of all Star Wars media from the past 10 or so years, Andor remains my favorite. I've already done a review of the series I published back in December, but I'd like to do a full analysis instead of a fairly basic review. Today I'll be more in depth on my thoughts of the show, elaborating on what I said in my initial video, while also bringing up things I didn't catch on my first viewing. This includes any Legends content I can find, so expect me to mention that whenever I can. Before watching Andor, whenever I heard the word Empire in Star Wars media, I'd usually think Stormtroopers or Inquisitors or Vader and Palpatine. In the first episode, we're introduced to a new division of the Galactic Empire we've never seen before, or at least that I haven't seen before. In contrast to the Mandalorian's pilot episode, which drops us straight into the action, pilot for Andor only has one brief fight scene between Cassian and two Imperial security guards. When Cassian kills one of them, the other just surrenders and doesn't try to fight. He even begs for mercy, showing that Cassian isn't killing mindless soldiers, but real people with families and friends. And he's aware of that, given that his facial expression hints at a bit of remorse for his actions. As Cassian escapes to Ferrix, we're treated to a more chill scene of a droid wheeling across a town and into a scrapyard. Once it rolls into Cassian's home, we see him have a traumatic flashback of when he was a young boy, part of a native tribe on Kenari, as the tribe witnesses a mysterious ship fall out of the sky. The way that not everything was explained in a single flashback creates a sense of mystery about what really happened on Kenari. I really like how there aren't any subtitles for what Kenari people are saying, it being up to the audience to decide what they are actually trying to say. Some Imperial Security Bureau, or ISB workers, are trying to find out who committed the murder of the guards. These guys are not only more competent than Stormtroopers, but also more human. When it comes to Stormtroopers, you rarely see who's behind the mask, and they're usually just treated like jerks and need to be beat up. These security guards don't wear armor or blast civilians, they're just people trying to get their job done. The episode ends with another flashback to Kenari, as we see Cassian, or Casa as he was known at this point, go out with the hunting tribe to see what happened to the starship that crashed into the mountains nearby. The second episode picks up right where the last flashback scene left off, with a band of hunters searching for the ship's wreckage when Casa, aka young Cassian, finds an Imperial mining site, which does play a role in the story later on. Then we see the gong guy who was featured in the trailers, probably signaling what time it is. Not really important to the plot, but I just wanted to point that out. For the next few minutes, we see the town's residents living out their daily lives, something I don't think we've ever seen in Star Wars, or at least not often. Most notable of these is the romantic scenes with Vix, Cleena, and Tim Carlo. Their relationship, while not very deep, feels natural and realistic, and I'm kind of glad that romance wasn't forced like Anakin and Padme's relationship in the prequels. This episode is the first time we see Marva Andor, one of the series' most vital characters. She's a good mother to Cassian, as she genuinely feels worried after finding out that Cassian is being hunted. One particular character of the show I think deserves more attention is Imperial Inspector Cyril Karn. He's the perfect representation of one of my previous points on how these Imperials aren't pure evil, and they're people kinda like us, which I'll talk more about later, so keep that in mind. We then go back about 2 decades earlier again, when the hunting party arrives at the crash site of the ship, and the flashback ends as the group leader cautiously approaches the wreckage. In the middle of the flashback, we go back to the present day and see an elderly man land his ship near the town on Ferrix. Since we don't know this man's name yet unless we look at the credits or subtitles, I'll just be calling him Stellan Skarsgård. As the leader investigates the site, she is shot by a surviving crew member, who is pelted by dozens of blow darts until he falls to the ground. Curious, Casa continues exploring the ship. In the present, Cassian learns that Kenari became uninhabitable after an Imperial mining disaster unleashed deadly gases across the planet. A group of Imperials travel through hyperspace, while Cyril Karn speaks to them. They act like they think they're the good guys. As the old saying goes, every villain is a hero of their own story. Stellan Skarsgård's shuttle lands in the settlement, and he meets up with Vix. The fact we don't know his name yet raises a lot of questions like, who is this guy, or can we trust him? The next shot transitions from B2 Emo rolling across the town to B2, along with Marva and Clem Andor, salvaging equipment from the downed Separatist ship as they come across Casa, infuriated by the death of the tribe's leader, breaking equipment. On Ferrix, Cyril Karn and Linus Mosk's team are working to hunt Cassian down. A couple of scrap workers spot the Imperials, and they see them as soldiers doing their work instead of being afraid of them. In another flashback, Marva stuns Casa and takes him home. In the prison, as the Imperials are raiding the Andor home, the settlement's residents get pretty mad at them. Tells us how the townspeople aren't pleased with the Empire's treatment of them. Cassian meets up with Stellan Skarsgård. Skarsgård knows Cassian's name and wants to buy the intact Starpath unit Cassian's been carrying for a while. Cassian, not trusting Skarsgård, holds him at gunpoint. Shortly after, the show's first real action sequence begins. The Imperial troops find Cassian and Skarsgård, and a gunfight ensues. As Cassian and Skarsgård escape a warehouse, we cut to Biggs being restrained by an officer. Tim comes in but is shot by a soldier. The relationship between these two characters makes his death scene a bit more powerful, because we knew who he was. When Cassian holds Cyril Karn at gunpoint, the elderly man pushes Cassian to kill Cyril, but he incapacitates the trooper instead, showing that despite being an outlaw, Cassian has morals. The Imperials seemingly gunned down the two rebels' landspeeder, only for him to find out it was a decoy for both to escape. Luther then sets off a bomb in front of 3 officers. Then we get a few brief shots of Marva and B2 worried about what will happen to Cassian. And as Cassian and the other rebel escape off planet, we see a series of flashbacks edited to fit with the scenes they're in. On board the ship, Skarsgård tells Cassian that he'll die fighting the Empire, which we eventually see take place in Rogue One. The Elder gives Cassian a high-stakes mission to steal from the Empire. This is the episode where we're first introduced to the political side of the show. Some Imperial supervisors start off by discussing everyday business until one brings up the incident on Morlana 1. In a similar manner to the officers, they treat themselves as the heroes instead of fully being aware how horrible they are as people. Cassian and Skarsgård both land on Aldhani, as Skarsgård hands Cassian a Quati Signet, a necklace meant to celebrate the victory against the Rakatans thousands of years ago. I know I've already stated this in my initial review, but I am very thankful some Legends content is being brought into canon, assuming these are the same Rakatans from Legends. We're introduced to Vel Sartha, a rebel who Skarsgård tries to convince to work with Cassian, as the Canary Man goes under the pseudonym Clem. On Coruscant, Cyril and Mosk are told they will be sent to a transfer center after failing to capture or kill Andor, giving them a bit of an understandable motivation for their actions. Vel introduces Cassian to a small band of rebels and tells them to get to work. Meanwhile, Skarsgård on board the ship dresses himself up while flying to Coruscant to meet Mon Mothma. In comparison to the prequels, Coruscant doesn't look as lively or bustling as it did a few decades ago. This symbolizes how the Empire is draining the life out of the galaxy bit by bit. The band of rebels plan a heist on an Imperial dam, discussing what to do to complete the mission. They don't just win by running in guns ablaze, and instead carefully plan the mission. In my review, I said Vel and Cinta weren't necessary inclusions for the show. On rewatch, I realized I was just being really dumb because I didn't know Vel was necessary for Cassian to become part of the rebellion, and Cinta gets a role too. We're also introduced to the antagonist, Imperial Supervisor Dejo Miro, who, in spite of not killing anyone directly, proves to be an intelligent and formidable threat to the rebels. Seeing her work with the Imperials to fight the rebels is like a reflection on how the rebels work together to fight the Empire. Now we get to see some of Cyril Karn's personal life with his mother, who always wants her son to be the best he can. On Aldhani, Cassian has a chat with the other rebels, and they learn a little bit about each other, and each rebel has their own thing that sets them apart from the rest of the team. What makes these interactions special is that they feel natural, like conversations people have in the real world. In the previous episode, we were introduced to Mon Mothma's daughter, Leda, who was originally mentioned in a Legends comic Entrenched. Surprises me how Disney took a name only known from a single line of dialogue and made Leda her own character with her own subplot. The rebels trained to act like Imperials, a smart way to sneak in. This shows us again it's best to practice and plan before going on the mission. On the dam, Lieutenant Gorn and an Imperial corporal discuss the view. I can't say I blame them, as the show's environments make it look movie-worthy. They also mention the Aldhani people congregating in fewer numbers compared to the past, another sign of the Empire sucking the life out of everything they touch. Vel tells Cassian about Gorn, who has lost his taste for the Empire. Everyone has their own rebellion, just in different ways. Skeen finds out that Cassian has been carrying a Kyber crystal the whole time and loses trust in him, and threatens to kill him, making the stakes feel higher and forcing Cassian into admitting he's been paid to be on this mission. This episode is the first mention of Stellan Skarsgård's character's name, Luthen Rael, so thanks Disney, now I get to call him by his real name. In the morning, Cassian has a conversation with Nemik. While Nemik is ready for the mission, Cassian warns him to be careful of what he wishes for. Even though they don't agree on the same subject, Nemik is still glad Cassian is with the team. As Cassian, Taruman, Skeen, and a couple other rebels walk down a hill, Skeen tells Cassian the truth about Taruman, that he was once a stormtrooper, the Imperial division that killed Cinta's family. A couple of comets fall from the sky, thus signalizing the beginning of the Eye of Aldani. Soon we learn that Commandant J-Hold Behaz has a family on the planet, a wife and a son. His son views him as one of the good guys, once again pushing the narrative of parents influencing their children for better or worse. Following Taramin's orders, the rebels disguise themselves as Imperials while Vel and Cinta sneak onto the dam. As the Imperials and rebels march into the dam, J-Hold Behaz's aforementioned son, Leonard, is amongst them. Once they're inside, the rebels reveal themselves and hold the Imperials at gunpoint, including Leonard. This is an instance of the rebels going to the greatest extremes to complete a mission, something a character like Saw Gerrera would do. And now the heist begins. The rebels don't immediately shoot the Imperials, instead try to force them into cooperating to avoid casualties on either side. It's quite ironic to see the Imperials being bossed around by the rebels. The team collects as many credits as they can as the Donnie people celebrate the Eye, and then the Eye begins. While forced to work for the rebels, J-Hold begins to grow weary, and that won't end well for him. On the planet, some TIE fighter pilots get into their ships with the word of a heist. This heist isn't just for nothing, and will be vital to making the rebellion a much more significant threat to the Empire. Just when the rebels are about to depart on a ship, some Imperials step into the scene. Due to the stress of what has happened, J-Hold dies of heart failure, and a big fight breaks loose. Taramin is shot down in the chaos. The fact that we knew the character beforehand, similarly to Tim Carlo, makes us feel for the characters, unlike in Kenobi where it was that one rebel woman who I don't remember the name of who sacrifices herself in the middle of a battle. The rebels begin their escape, but Nebik is injured after being squished between the credits. The Eye makes this episode look like it should be played in a theater. It makes me wonder why the other Star Wars shows don't look this cinema-worthy in terms of visuals. A trio of TIE fighters chase the rebels into the Eye, leading to one of the best looking scenes in any Star Wars media, with all the colors of the crystals falling out of the sky, and with the music swelling up, and it needs to be seen to be believed. After escaping, the team lands on a planet called Frenzo for Namek to get medical attention from Dr. Quadpa. In any other Star Wars media, Quadpa would quickly become the center of the Star Wars memes community, but here is taken seriously with very little dialogue. Outside of the building, Cassian learns that Skeen is only here for money and plans to dump the rebel team. He wants Cassian to take advantage of the current situation and tells him that he lied about his past. Understandably pretty mad, Cassian shoots Skeen for doing so. Inside we learn that Nemec succumbed to his injuries, but Vel thanks Quadpa for trying. Cassian comes in to witness this bittersweet moment and tells Vel that he killed Skeen and that he's leaving the rebel group. He gives Vel the orders to give the Quati Signet back to Luthen. In return, Vel gives Nemec's manifesto to Cassian, who leaves with it, shows how every character plays a role in the story and that there's no filler. Near the end of the episode, we get to see the Senate meeting room on Coruscant, where Amon tries to speak against the Empire only to be rudely ignored. Luthen hears the news of the rebel attack and is happy for the mission's success. In the Karn family apartment, Edie tells her son Cyril that the current suit he's wearing says he's got low self-esteem and craves for approval, accurate to his character. The next scene gives us a brief cameo of Colonel Wolf Yularen, who made a minor appearance in the original Star Wars film. It's cool for the show to have some sort of fan service without shoving it in your face. The speech Yularen gives is surprisingly threatening, even if he doesn't threaten to directly kill anybody. Deidre, on the other hand, is more obsessed with finding Cassian and bringing him to quote-unquote justice. Luthen learns of the ripple effects of the heist, how all personnel at the dam are suspected of aiding the rebels, and the native Donnies are being questioned for possibly joining to help the so-called terrorists. Even though the rebels completed their mission, it came at the expense of others. Luthen is now considerably less glad of the mission's success. In Luthen's museum, you can see the Keldor's mask as one of the exhibits. If you're unaware, this is Jedi Master Plo Koon's species. I remember when the trailers were shown and everyone thought Plo was alive, even though he clearly died during Order 66. Now this is the part of the show where Cassian becomes less of the main focus, which was a minor problem I had at first, but on rewatch, I gotta say I love this decision. Cassian Andor isn't the main character, but the main driving force for most of the show's events. Every subplot can be traced back to Cassian's storyline in some way. Luthen uses Cassian to start a rebellion, Dedra Meero becomes increasingly unhinged trying to stop the rebels, Mon and Luthen work together to reduce the Empire's power, and so on. Clea and Vel discuss Cassian Andor, and Clea suggests that he knows too much, which could risk the existence of the rebellion. On Ferrix, Cassian returns home to find out that not only his mother is ill, but also he learns that Ferrix is under Imperial authority, and that's the least of his worries, learning that the late Tim Carlo reported him to the Empire. And Bix tried to warn him. For some good news, Cassian tells Mara that he's got enough credits for the two to leave to somewhere else. On Coruscant, Mon Mothma is attending a party and talks with another Chandrila named Tay Kolma, about to discuss some important matters when Leda joins their conversation. If you pay enough attention to the background, you'll see how the party attendants have expensive, fancy clothing, unlike the standard apparel of your average citizen on Ferrix or Tatooine. Tay and Mon resume their discussion about standing up against the Empire, not by stealing or killing, but through words. Tay and Mon resume their discussion about standing up against the Empire, not by stealing and killing, but through words. Cassian meets up with Bix, who tells him that he needs to escape, and as Cassian leaves, he sees some stormtroopers, and we get a flashback scene where the community of the town protests against an Imperial army of clone troopers, with Clem being forced to intervene, trying to end the argument. When Cassian goes back home, Marva tells him that she can't leave Ferrix, explaining that the only place in this galaxy the Empire hasn't occupied yet is her mind. Cassian views this as crazy, but Marva is okay staying here for the rest of her life. We then see the final flashback of the show, Clem hanging from a rope, telling us just what the Empire does to good people. Marva tells Cassian that she knows of the Aldani robbery, and that people are now starting to stand up against the Empire. Marva has hope, while Cassian believes that the rebellion is doomed to fail. Cassian, being forced to leave, tells Marva that he'll always be worried for her when he does. Before Cassian leaves, Marva tells him to stop searching for his sister, that the search will take him nowhere, and what happened was beyond his control. When Cassian leaves, Marva picks up a blaster, hinting that she'll play a more direct role in the rebellion than we think. The planet Cassian will stay at for now is Neomos, a planet closely resembling a tropical beach resort. As a Floridian myself, I can say that this is a very accurate representation of a beach hotel planet. Cassian, adopting the new name Keith Grigo, is staying at a hotel with a woman named Wendy. On the beach, Keith is unlucky enough to be caught in the middle of a few individuals fleeing a group of stormtroopers, and is suspected to be a part of whatever they were doing. Out of the blue, a security droid steps up the stairs and takes the place of a shore trooper. Disney basically tricked us into believing that this was K2SO from Rogue One, who will reappear in the upcoming Andor Season 2. Cassian, despite being a tourist as far as the authorities are aware, is sentenced to 6 years in prison, showing how the Empire is willing to act irrationally at any given time. Every time the rebels do something, the Empire tightens its grasp on the galaxy. Cassian learns that he is being sent to a prison on the water moon of Narkina 5. While this happens, someone else is being sent to a planet called Belsavis, which can be visited in the Old Republic MMO. If you've played the game, you'll know that this planet is a large prison, similar to Narkina 5. On Narkina 5, the prisons, while not exactly hexagonal, still reminded me of the TIE Fighter's wings, which to me is a sign of Imperial dominance. In the meeting room, Dedra Miro shows the Starpath unit left by Andor in the warehouse. They plan to track the thief and find Axis, whom we know as Luthen Rael. When Cassian arrives at the prison, the guards quite seriously order them to follow procedures and force them into labor. The way they treat the prisoners like slaves makes them look like fascists, probably because George Lucas himself drew inspiration from Nazis to create the Empire in the original trilogy. Like, these guys are brutal, threatening the prisoners with a painful death if they don't adhere to the rules. When Cassian is lifted down to his unit, he meets some fellow inmates, including one of the show's fan favorites, Kino Loy. We learn that the prison has this kind of hierarchy system, with the lower prisoners being at the bottom, higher prisoners like Kino Loy in the middle, and the Imperials at the top. The ones higher up are always telling the lower people what to do, as the Imperials force the prisoners to work, and Kino is always telling the other prisoners what to do. At the party on Coruscant, you can briefly see that the creatures put in the drinks are actually a type of eel called a squig, which are taken from a brief mention in an obscure Legends book. Mon, Heron, and some other senators discuss the new laws Emperor Palpatine has put in place. In the prison, Cassian learns how the cells work, with the floor that electrocutes anyone who stands on it at the wrong time, how to eat, and the change of rules due to the garrison raid. After working for 30 shifts, Cassian gets used to prison life, working each day and following Kino's orders. Back home, Bix and Brasso treat Marva. Even if she can't physically fight the Empire, she's still a rebel. We'll see how that works later, but not in this episode. Bix contacts Clea to find Cassian's whereabouts, and Luthen tries to find him too. In the prison cells, one prisoner decides to fry themselves. Even if the Empire isn't directly killing anyone, they can still take a life. Luthen flies his ship to Segamillo, where he meets Saw Gerrera, one of the show's most hyped inclusions, as he was one of the few pre-Disney acquisition characters in Andor that people had a good knowledge of. Luthen tries to get Saw to change his ways and work for a rebel Anto Krieger, but Saw refuses to become a mercenary and chooses to fight only for his people. In the Ferrix settlement, Dedra, Cyril, and some stormtroopers interrogate Bix for information, forcing her into a chair. In the interrogation room, Dedra figures out that there's a web of relationships instead of Cassian doing all of this on his own. The Imperial Doctrine Room takes over and tells the story of one particularly despicable action of the Empire, massacring the native species on the moon of Thyzon Frey, and places a listening device on Bix's head, hearing the screams of the children in the Empire slaughtered. On Narkina 5, a new prisoner is brought in, and Cassian and another prisoner start a plan to escape by using a lift. Before they can do that, the prisoners work to manufacture some equipment. While in their cells, they discuss a plan to escape, but Kino tells them it's best to stay quiet about it. In the meeting office, Deja reports the results of the interrogation with the other ISBs. The next day, the prisoners find out that 100 other prisoners have been fined for making trouble. Even though we know Cassian will find a way to escape the prison, the stakes still feel high because there are a lot of other characters whom we don't know the fate of. The prisoners are about to panic, but Kino calms them down. They continue to work on building equipment. Earlier in this episode, we found out that Vel Sartha and Mon Mothma were cousins. They discussed how they've made their lives mean something by fighting evil. Elsewhere in Coruscant, Cyril tries to make it up to Dedra, and understandably, she isn't very happy with the young man's behavior and tells him to leave. The ISB plans to foul Anto Krieger's ship and make it look like an accident. In the prison, Cassian and a couple of other prisoners try to help an elderly man named Ulaf into his cell. A med team arrives and tries to help him, but he can't be saved and is put down. Cassian and Kino can only watch as their friend is put out of his pain. The medic warns the two that Ulaf was lucky, and they're not prepared for what's coming to them. Cassian figures out that the prisoners aren't being freed, and instead are to be locked up for the rest of their lives unless they can escape. He plans to escape tomorrow when an opportunity arrives. While Cassian has hope, Kino believes that the plan will fail. On Coruscant, it turns out that the ISB's plan to kill Krieger is currently working. Kino forms his own plan for the prisoners to escape, and Cassian knows it's best to submit to his idea. On Ferrix, things have only gotten worse since the Imperial occupation. On Coruscant, Mon has a discussion with banker Davos Golden. That is, until Davos brings up his son, implying that he wants his son to marry Leda. Mon disapproves, and Davos is sent out. This gives us a perspective on what everyday life is like for the rich people, as opposed to the lives of the less wealthy citizens of Ferrix. In the factory, Cassian, Kino, and the other prisoners put their plan into motion. There's a new prisoner coming in, the perfect opportunity to start an escape. Cassian breaks a pipe, leaking water all over the floor, while the other prisoners grab what they can to fight. When the opportunity arrives, Cassian jams the lift, and the prisoners throw what they can at the guards. When the power goes out, the prisoners go all in fighting the guards who have abused them for far too long. And the sad thing is, some don't make it. People with actual families and lives taken from them by the Empire. People with wives, kids, and friends they'll never see again. People from other parts of the prison make their escape. Cassian and Kino make it to the control room, where they force the guards to turn the power off. This is when Kino gives that now iconic speech, where he encourages the prisoners to gain their freedom, telling them that he'd rather die fighting those who oppress them, than die not taking action. While it seems that the others swim to their freedom, Kino reveals that he's unable to swim, and that's the last we see of him. The scene is both tragic and beautiful at the same time, one presumably sacrificing himself for hundreds to gain their freedom. On Coruscant, ISB member Lonnie Young, who secretly works for Luthen Rail, enters an elevator and meets up with Luthen, who gives a monologue on how he had to sacrifice everything he had and loved for the rebellion. While Cassian and Melshi scale a seaside cliff, the people of Ferrix mourn the loss of one of the town's most loved people. B2 is especially sad, showing that some droids can have feelings more complex than shoot to kill or haha funny comic relief. They can have feelings as if they're sentient beings. In order to reach a quadjumper, Cassian and Melshi try to sneak around two Narkinians, but are caught in a trap. The aliens are about to kill the two, but decide to let them go. All four get into the quadjumper and leave for Neamos. Upon learning the news that a close family member of Cassian Andor has passed on, the ISB is quick to take advantage of a tragedy, planning to lure Cassian back home. Cyril receives a call from Mosk, who informs him that Cassian's mother has passed away, and that he might be at the funeral. Cyril views this as an opportunity to finish his job. In Luthen's shop, Clea and Vel discuss what happened on Ferrix, showing that the townspeople aren't the only ones who miss Marva. Back at the Neamos Hotel, Cassian gets ready to leave for Ferrix. Luthen speaks with Saw again. While Saw's excited for Krieger's plan, Luthen knows that it won't work. Luthen asks Saw if he should warn Krieger or allow the ISB to kill him, knowing if he chooses the latter, it'll make them overconfident and weak. Luthen holds Saw at gunpoint to get him to listen to him. Luthen gets back into his ship and leaves for Ferrix. While having a conversation with Clea on a computer screen, he is interrupted when he is stopped by an Imperial patrol. Luthen's ship is being pulled by a tractor beam, but he has a few tricks up his sleeves, shooting some countermeasures to destroy Imperial equipment. A group of TIE fighters engage Luthen, who blasts them to bits very quickly, but in an awesome way, turning his ship into an oversized, double-bladed lightsaber. Cassian contacts Dan Wan to tell Marva that he's okay, but learns of the unfortunate news. Melshi asks Cassian how many made it out of the prison, and Cassian responds, "Not enough." This scene adds layers of empathy to the character, giving him complexity that Rogue One couldn't fit into its runtime. Melshi tells Cassian that the galaxy needs to know what happened on Narkina 5. The two part ways, and Cassian looks into the sunset, because it wouldn't be Star Wars without a sunset scene. Now here we are, the last episode of the season. Did they end it with a bang? Yes! Inspired by the rebels, Wilman Pack constructs a detonator, as if he knows of what's to come. Cassian finally returns to Ferrix, and we see a quick flashback of his father teaching him how to wash machines and save money. Wait, didn't I say episode 7 had the final flashback? Well, I'm sorry I lied. Feel free to leave your dislike and watch something else. Not long after, Cassian reads Nemik's manifesto. Alex Slaughter, who played Nemik, narrates. For a brief summary, the manifesto tells the reader that while it may not seem that way, the Empire is brittle, and even small acts of rebellion weaken the Empire's grip on the galaxy. Brasso warns Cassian that he shouldn't be here, and tells him that Marva saw the potential inside her son, knowing what happened wasn't his fault at all, and that he made the rebellion as big as it is. People on both sides get ready for the funeral, knowing Cassian will inevitably show up. Dedra grows suspicious that something is about to happen. The funeral begins with the musicians playing a solemn tune. The Imperials aren't happy to see appreciation for anyone under their rule and try to break up the crowd. Nevertheless, they keep on marching. Just as the Imperials try to drive them off, the crowd plays a triumphant song, chanting "Stone and Sky! Stone and Sky!" and V2 Emo plays Marva Carassi Andor's final recorded message. In the posthumous message, Marva tells the story of her sister and herself taking a walk to the funeral square, being inspired by the dead. She tells the crowd that the galaxy has been sleeping for too long, and the disease that is the Empire is spread unchecked. She tells the crowd to fight the Empire, and the citizens of Ferrix stand up against their oppressors. During the fight, Cassian helps Bix out of her torture room. Wilman throws a bomb he crafted earlier to kill some Imperials, but unintentionally kills some innocents too. Dedra gets involved in the fight, but is forced into hiding for her own safety, with Zero being the only one who can save her. Vel, Cinta, Wilman, B2, Cassian, and Bix all board the escape ship, but Cassian says he won't be coming with them. He does say this won't be the last time they meet, though. Moments before departing on his hullcraft, Luthen meets Cassian, who is aware the rebel leader came to kill him. Cassian doesn't try to fight back, allowing Luthen to do what he wants. Luthen decides that this isn't the end of their adventures and lets him live. In a post-credits scene, we get a sneak peek of what might happen next season. We see some small droids working on something big, which turns out to be the Death Star, which we can expect to play a bigger role in Season 2. With this being my longest video yet, you can tell I've had a lot to say about Andor. I'd easily rank it among the original trilogy and Knights of the Old Republic duology as my favorite pieces of Star Wars media. Andor is one of those things I just can't think negatively of. If you somehow haven't seen it, drop whatever you're doing and watch every episode. Or if slower burners aren't your cup of tea, that's okay, just watch what you like. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.